Welcome to Tom's Messiaen vlog, episode 17, and hosted on this occasion in Blackburn Cathedral, where I've been before, of course, for Tom's Messiaen vlog in the past. Really, I mean, I'm just doing this for the fun of it, to be honest with you. I just wanted for you to hear some bits of the Messe de Pentecote on this amazing organ, which I'm coming to the conclusion that it's the best organ for Messiaen in the UK. I mean, it just is fantastic. There's so little compromise with the registrations required. The sound is vital and dynamic and exciting, and there's a fabulous acoustic as well. I'm just going to talk you through what the Messe de Pentecote consists of. In actual fact, the second movement is going to be the subject of a more detailed Tom's Messiaen vlog episode shortly. So we'll do more hardcore detail and discussion on that occasion. This is a broad brushstrokes introduction to the Messe de Pentecote. So the first thing to say is it originated during Messiaen's extraordinary period of experimentation in the wake of the Second World War, which was such a vast influence on the next generation of composers. I mean, Messiaen pioneered things like total serialism, which he then, hardly made use of at all as a technique, but those composers who were in awe of him at the time, it defined their careers. Messiaen, meanwhile, went on and did other things. He developed his bird music in the 1950s. So remarkable, really, what went on in the late 40s, early 50s in Messiaen's music. And right at the heart of what he was doing was his keyboard music. There's the famous 4 etudes for the piano, notable for a whole bunch of reasons, and then 2 major organ works, the Lieve d'Orgue and the Messe de Pentecote, which I think grew out of the same sort of creative impulse, if you like. But what you end up with is the Lieve d'Orgue, which is almost a book of studies. I mean, that implies that it's dry. I don't mean that at all. But it's very, very focused on the techniques, at least to some extent, to a greater extent, perhaps, than the Messe. And then you have Messe de Pentecote, which feels much more like it's rooted in Messiaen's work as a liturgical organist. And indeed, it's one of very few pieces of Messiaen's music, for all his Christianity and that being the defining feature of his writing. There's very little music written for use in the liturgy, written for use at church. There's O Sacrum Convivium, the famous choral piece, and then the Messe. So it's an organ mass in the same tradition as Pierre Dumas, Nicolas de Grigny, and so on and so forth, these organ books and organ masses and so on and so forth. It's harking back to an earlier time, but also something that was still very much in currency in Messiaen's time as well. Let's not forget Tournemier's extraordinary sequence of organ masses. So, excuse me, the first movement of the Messe de Pentecote is the Entrée, the Entrée. That's where the priests enter. It's a short piece, and the subtitle is The Tongues of Fire. And the starting point for this piece is a little inscription, a verse from the book of Acts: tongues like as of fire sat upon each of them. So straight away we're delving into the event of Pentecost. I'm not going to give you a synopsis of the day of Pentecost here. It's not the role of this vlog. It's not a sermon, but do go and read the book of Acts, chapters 1 and 2, and you'll get a feel for what happened, the coming of the Holy Spirit. And what I'd say before I play you anything is that let's just think what that experience would have been like. It would have been wondrous and awesome and all sorts of stuff like that, but it also would have been kind of terrifying and really rather weird and otherworldly. And so I think Messiaen gets straight to that with his use of the organ. So here is that first movement, or not the whole thing, just the first page or so. An extraordinary registration, by the way. We have 16-foot and a mixture on the swell, and a 16-foot quinterton and a tierce on the positive. Here I'm using the great for that. And then the other manual is an 8-foot diapason and a quint. And then the pedal has the melody. The 4-foot reed is used. So, here we go. second time. Really, just such vital and exciting sound, isn't it? Where Messiaen's coming from in terms of the musical materials he's using, Greek rhythms, ancient Greek rhythms feature here. Elsewhere in Messe Pentecote, there are all sorts of other things that crop up, Hindu rhythms and so on and so forth. And as I said, I'm going to examine some of that in my next vlog post, where I'm going to not exactly analyse, but open up the second movement of the Messe Pentecote in some detail. But let's briefly move on to the second movement now. This is the Offertoire, longest piece in the Messe Pentecote. It's about 9 or 10 minutes long. This astonishing sort of collage. There's no way I can unpick it all now in this post, which is one of the reasons why I'm leaving it till later. But it's fabulous. The Spirit of Truth, which the world cannot receive because it does not see it and does not know it. A quote from John's Gospel is what Messiaen has put underneath this piece, and the little subtitle is Things Visible and Invisible. So it's a quote from the Nicene Creed there. Now, I'm going to show you one thing and one thing only from this particular movement, and that is this sound. Messiaen's extraordinary use of the organ. That's the sound of the pit. That's things unseen. That's things invisible being vividly brought to life on the organ. Now, the reason why I'm showing you that one bit, that one note, although it happens several times in the piece, is because it just highlights some of the issues we have to deal with when we're playing Messiaen when it comes to registration. On the organ of La Trinité, the 16-foot basson on the positive, which is what he's asking for here, creates this astonishing sound. I commend to you Messiaen's recordings of his own music. Just listen to the Offertoire from the Messe Pentecote and wait for those bottom Cs. It's not a note at all. It has no pitch. It's just a sort of extraordinary sound. Messiaen described it as miraculous. He loved it, which is why he uses it. But it's one of those things that's almost impossible to recreate on any other organ. Some people, including me at times, go for a big powerful sound, like using the bottom of a pedal 16-foot reed, which Gillian Weir, quite rightly, I think, points out is probably the wrong approach. She says that, I think it's in her interview with Andrew McRae in the RCO Journal of 2008. She says that's the wrong way to go, because you're not really thinking through the meaning of the sound Messiaen is trying to create. So I've gone for something that's as otherworldly and as strange as I could muster here at Blackburn, even if it sort of has a clearer pitch than the La Trinité 16-foot reed bottom note. So what I've got here is actually a 16-foot quintuton, and my favourite stop on the Blackburn organ, the Holzriegel, 16-foot, and I've also thrown in an 8-foot flute as well, and that gives me. There you go, I just spoke to you for 2 minutes about one note. That's Tom's Messiaen vlog is all about the interesting corners, I'm sure. Then we move on to movement 3, the Consécration. So this is part of the Eucharistic prayer, the organ would play. Subtitle here is the gift of wisdom, and the biblical quotation. These things are relevant. This is what Messiaen's thinking of while he's writing from John 14. The Holy Spirit shall bring all things to your remembrance, whatsoever I have said unto you. So we're talking about the gift of wisdom, Jesus' words, the Holy Spirit bringing those to the disciples' minds in future so they don't forget. What does Messiaen do with this? Well, we just have two ideas that oscillate. There's a return of the pedal 4-foot reed solo that we heard at the beginning in the first movement. So we have these notes played on that, and resonance chords effectively played on various colourful sounds on the 3 keyboards. And the rhythmic shape is a Hindu rhythm. And that alternates with a more plain song-like passage. Those two ideas alternate. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm just going to play the first page. In fact, you know what, the Hindu rhythms are split into 2. But you only got 2 registrations that oscillate, if you see what I mean. So perhaps I'll play the first page and a half, you'll see what I mean. Right, here we go. I hope you're you're probably getting a sense of my enthusiasm for this piece. Possibly my favourite Messiaen cycle, but also I hope you're getting a flavour of this piece's dynamism and just what an exciting and colourful piece it is. I totally love it, I really do. Then we come to the communion, distribution of communion, and the organ plays again. This is The Birds and the Waters, that's the subtitle. More about that in a second. It's a quote from the Apocrypha this time, Daniel 3 in the French Jerusalem Bible. All ye waters that be above heaven, bless ye the Lord. All ye fowls of the air, bless ye the Lord. And so Messiaen provides us with birds and water. I think what I'll show you, well, two things. We've already heard on Tom's Messiaen vlog the Song of the Nightingale. I had a whole discussion on that in a previous episode, and I did actually play a bit of this section of the Messe and Pentecote, but I played it on my organ at home, so you've not heard it with its correct registrations. So here we have the Nightingale. Oh, no, that's the wrong registration. Here we go. The sound there is a 4-foot flute, a TS and a 1-foot, then a 4-foot flute and the high mixture on the swell, and an 8-foot flute on its own. And then we get to the famous middle section, I think one of the most famous little bits of Messiaen's music, organ music. The left hand plays the water droplets alluded to earlier, the right hand plays birds. Idea. A blackbird sings. A blackbird appears on a 4-foot flute, and actually this particular blackbird is identical to a blackbird that appears in the 4 etudes, the 4 piano etudes as well, interestingly enough. Of course, written around the same time, so it's the same specific blackbird that Messiaen must have notated somewhere or other, I don't know where. And then there's a final section where you sort of hear Messiaen that's familiar from before the war, the sort of rather jazzy harmonies, and it's very sort of melodic and beguiling. And another famous feature of this fourth movement, the communion, is the way above the final chord there's this staccato line rising up on a 4-foot flute, then to a 1-foot flute, and underneath that 32-foot appears. So I'll play that to you in the hope that you will be able to perceive some of it, despite this being a vlog post and not having a full professional mic set up. Hopefully you'll see it, you'll hear it. So that movement concludes with the highest and lowest notes of the organ, pretty much. Oddly, much as the Prelude in C major, number 54, BWV 545 by Bach, opens the lowest and the highest notes at the same time. So it's a strange sort of parallel thing there. I don't know why my brain went there, probably because it's late into the evening and I've been rehearsing for ages. Finally, we come to the Sortie, the wind of the Spirit, the mighty rushing wind. So what's the passage there? You can see my score's falling apart. Apologies for that. Acts 2, back to Acts again. A rushing mighty wind filled all the house. So here's how Messiaen produces that effect. And then at that point, we have another well-known passage. The right hand plays the Song of the Lark. The left hand and the pedal have this rhythmic device, chromatic durations. So the left hand starts off slow with notes which are 23 semiquavers long, just checking that out, chords. The pedal starts 4 semiquavers. And basically, in short, the pedal notes get progressively longer, the left-hand chords get progressively shorter, and over the top of that flies this choir of larks. Actually, it's a choir, he says, of larks. It's the most astonishing section. I think it has to be played in a fairly manic way, if you can get away with it, because if you've ever gone hill walking and heard a lark, they do sound slightly manic. So here we go. And then at the end, there's this really interesting passage. If you look through Messiaen's organ music, you will find several places where monody is a feature. I mean, many a place in the Livre de Saint-Saccharin, for example, often in that context it's plain song, but just, a single line. In fact, there is a posthumously published piece of organ music called Monody. So this idea of a single line played in this vast space on this vast instrument, it's an astonishing idea, isn't it, really? But Messiaen does that quite a lot. Look at the first movement of Les Cordes Glorieuses, for example. And here we have a monody, and I'm going to play it to you slowly and gently. That's sort of it, a bit slower. What's astonishing about this one is that it's supposed to be played fast and on full organ. But he says that it's to be played freely. Now, if you listen to the Olivier Latry recording of this piece, which is stunning, by the way, of course, this section, he plays, it's machine gun-like. It's totally thrilling, especially with the chamades on the Notre Dame organ popping. It's a remarkable sound. But it's completely relentless rhythmically, as far as I can hear. Messiaen says play it freely, so I can't help, that means you're free to choose to play it as Latry does, and I've often played it like that myself. But I've started to wonder whether there's scope for getting some rubato in there. I haven't quite worked it out yet. I'm still giving that some thought. How do you introduce freedom into just this overwhelming monolithic noise? Well, anyway, why don't we have a listen to that, and you can tell me, answers on a postcode, what you think. So, here's the last page of the Sortie, including this extraordinary monody. And if you got the impression that perhaps I did this entire vlog post just to play you that bit, well, maybe you're right. But no, I hope that has been an interesting introduction to the Messe de Pentecote. Maybe it's thrown up a few new thoughts for you if it's something you've played before and listened to a lot, and if it's a piece you're not familiar with, well, there's an introduction. Tune in again next time for a more detailed look at the second movement.